Christian truths are clear and practical. Each person will find simple principles for their life in them, following which they can build a harmonious and happy life. Today, we'll talk about forgiveness. Christianity sets high moral standards, which sometimes cause controversy, in particular, forgiveness. Is this not a weakness? Wouldn't it be right to avenge the offense, punish the offender? Is it always worth forgiving? And does forgiveness mean the full restoration of the relationship that was before the offense was committed? Let's figure it out. To begin with, let's clarify what is meant by offense. This is a painful reaction that we experience because of the actions of other people that we perceive as unfair and offensive. Let's right away stipulate that the actions of another person may be intentionally such, or they may only be perceived by us as an offense and unfair. As a result of resentment, pain appears in the heart, as a result of which it is difficult for a person to communicate with someone he's offended by. Therefore, often the offended person distances himself from the one who offended him or stops communicating altogether. Frequent companions of resentment are anger, hatred, and the desire to take revenge, that is to cause another reciprocal pain. Also, the pain of an offended person distorts the perception of the offender and all his words and actions, seeing in them a hidden subtext directed against himself. But often, this is not the case. Sometimes there is no subtext at all, and no one deliberately intended to offend us, and this is just our interpretation of another person's act. Therefore, the most correct and simple thing to do with any offense is to find out what really happened. By the way, this can be done by both the offended party and the one who felt that the other person pulled away from him, and can ask himself if he offended the other in some way. Although this is the simplest and seemingly obvious action, it is very often neglected, and the distance between people during this time sometimes becomes insurmountable. Christianity says a lot about resentment and the need to forgive another. The sacrificial death of Christ on the cross shows God's unconditional forgiveness and love for a sinful person, on the basis of which the following call sounds to Christians in the New Testament: forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, had forgiven you. Also, Jesus Christ himself warns, "But if ye forgive not men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." Why would God forgive if we don't forgive? Apparently, the unforgiving one did not accept forgiveness from God himself. And here Christianity gives us an important principle for forgiveness. It is impossible that we are not offended, but the one who realizes how much he himself has been forgiven is able to forgive. That is, Christianity calls us for starting with yourself, exploring your life, realizing that every person, including himself, is a sinner in need of forgiveness. Realizing how much we've been forgiven saves us from judging others. When you remember the mercy shown to you, it becomes easier for yourself to show mercy to another. This idea is well reflected in the phrase attributed to William Shakespeare: "You are trying so hard to judge the sins of others, start with your own, and you will not get to others." But does forgiveness mean that the offender should not be punished for what he did? No, it doesn't. Christianity calls for not responding with evil to the evil done. But if we are talking about compensation for damages, restoration of right, etc., then justice can and should be restored. If a blatant evil has been committed, such as murder or violence, then the person should be isolated so that he does not pose a threat to others, and he should also be punished in order to realize the severity of the guilt and correct himself. It is obvious that impunity will lead to even greater crimes. But it is also necessary to forgive, in this case, at least for his own sake. After all, resentment poisons your own life. It is like a poison that you drink yourself, and you poison yourself and not another. Don't let the pain settle in your soul. By forgiving, you rid your heart of pain and anger, not letting it poison your life. There is a known case when on May 13, 1981, the Turk Mehmet Ali Acar made an attempt on Pope John Paul II, who received 4 bullet wounds, but the bullets did not touch vital organs, and subsequently, the Pope was able to visit the prisoner in prison. Yes, the criminal suffered a well-deserved punishment, but John Paul II said he was able to forgive him and visit him. Yes, it's not easy to forgive, but it is necessary for the sake of your mental and spiritual state. As Clive Lewis said, everyone agrees that forgiveness is a wonderful thing until he himself is faced with the alternative of forgiving or not forgiving, when forgiveness should come from him. So, forgiveness is a gift that we receive from God and give to people. Does forgiveness always mean restoring the relationship in full as it was before? No, does not mean that. Of course, it would be great if people could communicate and build relationships the same way as before the incident. Although forgiveness is unconditional, but the full restoration of relations is not always possible and is not necessary. For example, you can forgive a debt and the person who did not return it, but that does not mean that now your trust will be at the same level. Or in a corporate relationship, you can and should forgive an employee who caused damage. For example, disrupted important negotiations, but that does not mean that he should be trusted again with such important meetings. Or you can forgive the betrayal of your spouse and himself, but it will not always be possible to keep the relationship. To forgive does not mean to forget what happened and put everything back on track. This means to abandon the reactions generated by pain, that is, not to take revenge, not to cause pain, not to wish or do evil, not to gloat if something unpleasant happens to your abuser, etc. In conclusion, I want to say that there is one more thing that helps believers to forgive. They believe that their life depends not on people or their actions, but on God. Therefore, they realize the following: whatever people do against them, God can turn any evil into good. Therefore, you should not hold a grudge against people because God will turn it for good anyway. This helps believers to look optimistically into the future under any circumstances.